brothers. It was just something all Muslim children did. We go to the mosque to learn the Quran, learn your prayers. But after a few months, there was a regular imam who started to abuse me.
And just tell me a bit about what he was like himself.
He's quite intimidating. He's very arrogant. He would laugh and snigger at you. He was from Bangladesh. I believe now he was 26 when he arrived. Early on, he would compliment me all the time, saying I was a pretty girl, I had nice hair. He then started singling me out, asking me to do special jobs for him, cleaning, tidying up. So he'd take me out of the group with all the other children, which at first I didn't mind. I thought it was nice to get out of doing the prayers, but after a while I didn't like it because I was going away from my friends, and they all started noticing, thinking I was teacher's pet. That then went on to stroking my face, touching my back, kissing my face. He then progressed to touching my private parts. Further on, he started to masturbate in front of me, and then he would try and get me to masturbate him.
Did he ever at any point try to rape you?
There was at one point, yes. I was maybe about 11, and there was an incident where he'd pushed me onto the bed and he was trying to take my clothes off. And I do believe that if he had the opportunity, he would have raped me. We could hear somebody coming up the stairs, and he got off me and started putting his clothes back together. For many years I didn't understand what he was doing, but all I knew was I didn't like it and I wanted him to stop.
Were you able to tell anybody at all what was going on?
No, I was just very, very frightened, very confused. I would, on the way home, have in my head, I would get home, I would tell my mum, but as soon as I'd walk in the door, I just didn't know what to say to her, how to explain, what words to use, would they believe me? Everything was just going round and round in my head, just didn't understand.
You became quite obsessed with cleaning and washing.
Yes, I did. It just became a habit that as soon as I'd come home, I would have a bath, I would scrub myself to the point I'd start to bleed, and that's when the self-harm started too. As I got a bit older, I started to cut myself just in places where nobody would see, on my legs and things like that.
And your family didn't pick up on this?
No, I mean, it was a busy household, 4 older brothers. I was the youngest of all of them. So I guess they just said, get on with things. My mum would notice that I was constantly picking or scratching my face and things, but she would just say, what are you doing that for? Stop doing that. Instead of saying what's wrong, she never thought there was anything wrong. She just thought I was being mischievous, because he constantly would say I was pretty, I was prettier than the other girls, I had a nice face. He would kiss my face. So I thought if he was disfigured or it was horrible in some way, he would leave me alone. There was one teacher, she did notice I was quite withdrawn, and there was many times I wanted to say something, but I just never knew what to say or how to say it.
It wasn't just physical abuse, was it? Was there some psychological abuse as well?
There was at one time. I found a voice from somewhere and I said, no, I'm going to tell my dad. And I remember at that point he laughed at me. He picked up the phone and he rang my dad and he invited himself round for dinner. And I remember actually wetting myself and he was just sniggering and laughing at me. And I knew at that point there was no way of getting away from him.
Did you try to get out of going to the mosque classes?
Yeah, there were days where I would say to my mum, I don't want to go. I would drag my feet in not leaving the house. Again, she just thought I was being rebellious and didn't want to go, so she would just push me out of the door. There were days where I would just walk around in the streets and I wouldn't go. Again, if I didn't turn up, he would say, where have you been? I'll have to ask your parents, where have you been? So I was even more scared of not going in case he rang and asked where I was. So it was kind of like a vicious circle.
So how did it stop in the end?
Eventually I left when I was 11. By the time you finish the Quran, you can leave. Before I turned 12, I'd left.
And did your mum and dad ever find out what he was doing?
No.
Were you the only one that he was abusing?
No, there was another girl. There was the one day I'd walked into the room and this other girl was standing in the same place. He had his arms round her just how he had with me, and I was convinced 100% he was abusing her too. I think my mum and the other girl's mum had words and talked, but I never had the conversation with them. But I'm assuming they did know and they did find out.
And did you ever, at any point in your life, speak to your mum about what happened?
I didn't know. Sadly, I wish I had. She's no longer here now. But I wish I'd had the courage and the bravery that I have now back a few years ago.
How do you feel about the fact that none of your family picked up on this and that you had to suffer on your own?
I just feel like if you did know, why didn't you say anything? But I guess looking back on their own generation and the times and how the culture is, I can understand why they didn't want to say anything. Again, they just think if you sweep it under the carpet, it'll go away.
And growing up as a teenager, how did all of this affect you?
Well, as a teenager, as soon as I'd left the mosque, I'd blocked it out. I never thought about it, never spoke about it. It was something that happened to somebody else. That was the only way I could cope. I've always had anxiety and depression. Even today, I still suffer from it. It's not as bad. It wasn't until I was 18, 19, when I first had a boyfriend, that the issues came up. The physical side, I'm not interested. I still have issues with. It has changed my life. It's something I don't enjoy. I don't like to do. I have a wonderful and supportive husband now, and he's helped me. But we still have issues in the physical side, and he's very, very patient and very, very understanding. But it's just something I think that will stay with me forever. It's something that he's ruined and spoilt.
You're listening to a woman we're calling Nabila describe the abuse she suffered at the hands of an imam in the West Midlands. It happened nearly 30 years ago. She told Five Live's Amara Safira Elahi how the man was finally caught.
When I met my husband, he was very, very supportive, and he got me the help that I needed. We went to the doctors, I got counselling. I then went on and wrote my book, Brutal, which also helped me. By the end of my counselling, we had discussed whether I should go to the police or not. And I had actually decided, as it was such a long time ago and I didn't know where he was or what his name was, I decided that I would leave it at that. I wouldn't take it any further. But just so happens, after so many years, I'm driving down the road and I see him walking up the road. And I don't know whether that was a sign to say, no, you need to go to the police. And that's when I went to the police.
How did you feel when you saw him after all of those years?
Shocked, absolutely shocked. I mean, 30 years had gone past. I'd never seen or heard of this man.
Was he still teaching kids?
He was, yes. He was still teaching. I went to the police. I reported it. I obviously told them where I'd last seen him. And I said, well, there must be a mosque either there somewhere around. Or, I'm convinced he's still teaching. But it didn't. It took another 2 years before they did find him.
So you got a prosecution, and this went to trial last year.
Yeah.
And what was he found guilty of?
I think it was 6 accounts of indecent assault.
And so he got 11 and a half years
he did,
in
yes.
jail.
Yeah.
But what happened then?
Well, he was found guilty on the Friday, and on the Saturday afternoon he got a plane to Bangladesh and absconded.
That must be very frustrating for you.
Yes, very frustrating. I just feel like it's a bit of bittersweet. I got the victory that I was waiting for, but then he just simply walks out of the country. He had a Bangladesh passport as well, so obviously he had surrendered his British passport, but they didn't think to take his Bangladesh passport off him. They're still doing lots of inquiries. I'm waiting for the CPS to make a decision whether to extradite him back.
Do you feel let down by the justice system?
Hugely, yeah.
So for all you know, he could be doing this to other children?
Yeah, definitely. But I have to put some closure to it, because it's just going to keep going, and I've got my own family to think of now. So I'm trying to put this behind me.